have over $100 billion of cash.
Berkshire does that.
Berkshire. Maybe you do. Berkshire has over $100 billion in cash, and you say that you always want this company to be a fortress. So how much cash should an ordinary investor have on a percentage basis, do you think?
It depends on their personal situation. If you're working in something where you're living off your paycheck from week to week, you want to have a little cash around, and you certainly don't want to have a credit card that's maxed out or anything like that. But if your house is paid off, if you don't have big living expenses, you got a portfolio of decent, diversified businesses, you don't really need any cash.
The thing I will tell you that I didn't realize when I was getting out of school is how much the unusual person will jump out at you. I mean, and it isn't because they got 200 IQs or anything like that. It's really because of just how they behave, what they bring, the energy they bring, the commitment they bring, the quality of how they do things, how they treat the people around them, all kinds of things. But you will jump out much more than you might anticipate. One of the things you would want to be sure to do is, whether you like it or not, get very comfortable, it may take a while, with public speaking, for example. I mean, that's an asset that will last you 50 or 60 years, and it's a liability if you don't like doing it and are uncomfortable doing it, that also will last you 50 or 60 years, and it's a necessary skill. But a lot of the skills are just human skills. If you get the best out of people around you, that's a rare talent, and it doesn't correlate with IQ. It correlates with an attitude and toward the world and toward other people. And it's a talent that if you work at early and you're really conscious about it, you don't have to show up other people. You don't have to be smarter than they are or anything. You want to bring out the best in them. It will pay huge dividends.
What brings you the most satisfaction beyond family?
Well, my greatest satisfaction is just staying in good health. I mean, when you're 86, you look at this a little differently.
So you're in good health?
Oh yeah, I enjoy every day. I enjoy.
Well, what is it that you enjoy?
Well, I enjoy running Berkshire. I mean, if you get right down into my psyche, I mean,
and that's what I want to be.
Yeah, no, it's been my painting for 50 some years. I get to paint what I want. I don't have to do follow what Wall Street is telling me to do next quarter or something like that. So I own the brush, I own the canvas, and the canvas is unlimited. And that's a pretty nice game, and I get to do it every day with people I like. I don't have to associate with anyone that causes my stomach to churn. If I were in politics, I'd have to smile at a lot of people that I want to hit.
You just don't talk to them.
It's really, I've got a good deal. I'm hanging on to it.
Haven't bought the stock. You're an admirer of Jeff Bezos. A listing of the richest people in America came out. He's number one. I think your friend Bill Gates is number two. You're number three. So you can see what he's done in myriad ways.
Yeah.
And of course, the question is, how come you haven't bought Amazon? Is there still time to buy? Would you still buy?
Oh, I always admired Jeff. I mean, I met him 20 years ago or so, and I thought he was something special, but I didn't realize you could go from books to what's happened there. No, I mean, he had a vision and executed it in an incredible way, something that it would not have, but there's a lot of games I missed. I would have missed Microsoft even if I gotten to know Bill earlier or something. Those just aren't my games. I don't worry about the things that I miss that are outside my circle of competence of evaluating. I have missed things that were within my circle, and that's a terrible mistake. Those are my biggest mistakes. You haven't seen them. But it's not a mistake because I miss Netscape or something like that at all. I would say that maybe 5% of the companies or 10% of the companies at most are within an area of my circle of competence. There's something I should be able to understand. Just read and read and read. I probably read 5 to 6 hours a day. I don't read as fast now as when I was younger, but I read 5 daily newspapers. I read a fair number of magazines. I read 10Ks. I read annual reports, and I read a lot of other things too. So I've always enjoyed reading. I love reading biographies. I like to read more than most kids. I really like to read a lot.
my Aunt Edie gave me a copy of the World Almanac, and that was heaven to me. And I can still tell you that the almost population was 214,006 in 1930. Some numbers just kind of stick with you. And very early, probably when I was 7 or so, I took this book out of the Benson Library called 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000. And one of the ways in this book was having penny weighing machines. And I sat and calculated how much it would cost to buy the first weighing machine and then how long it would take for the profit for that one to buy another one. And I would sit there and create these compound interest tables to figure out how long it would take me to have a weighing machine for every person in the world. The first books I read on investment were actually in my dad's office. Pretty soon I read all the books in the office and read some of them more than once. A few years ago, I went to Amazon, and sure enough, they had this manual there. So, while reliving my youth, other guys were going to Amazon probably and buying old Playboys or something, but I bought old Moody's manuals instead. And when I got out of school, I started selling stocks. I was 20 years old at the time and looked about 16 and acted about 12. So I was not the most impressive salesperson anybody ever met. But what I would do was I went through page by page looking for possibly undervalued stocks. I'd like to tell you of two women that each sold a business to Berkshire Hathaway, to me actually, for many, many, many millions of dollars. Both of them started with $2,500. By coincidence, it was the exact same amount. It was everything they had in the world. And one of them was a woman who landed in Seattle in 1917, couldn't speak a word of English, had a tag around her neck. The tag said, Fort Dodge, Iowa. The Red Cross got her to Fort Dodge, where she was reunited with her husband who had come to the country a couple of years earlier. And she lived in Fort Dodge for 2 years, and as she put it, she felt like a dummy. She couldn't pick up the language. She couldn't learn a word. And so she and her husband decided to move to Omaha. So they came to Omaha in 1919, and there she found a small colony of Russian Jews, so she started feeling more at home. And then as her oldest daughter went to school, she would come home, this daughter, Frances, and she would teach her mother the words she'd learned in school that day. And this woman, Rose Blumpkin, spent 20 years saving money, bringing first her siblings over, her mother and father, $50 at a time. She sold used clothing to do it. She had 4 children during this period. And by 1937, after 20 years, she'd saved $2,500. She went to Chicago and she bought what she could of furniture. Her dream had always been to open a furniture store. And this woman who had never gone to school one day in her life, with $2,500, but with the same spirit that the people in this room had about having a dream and working to accomplish that dream, she built a business which she sold to me in 1983 for $60 million approximately, and which did $1.5 billion worth of business last year. The 4th generation is working in that business. This woman, Rose Blumpkin, she worked for me until she was 103. And then she retired and she died the next year, which is a lesson to all of Berkshire's managers that premature retirement, you can't tell what's going to happen. But Mrs. B, with her $2,500, one further fact about her, she could not read or write. And she went into a furniture business, and she didn't bring anything unique in furniture, but she brought a determination to succeed. She knew she could outwork anyone else. She knew that she cared about her customers. She worked at very low gross margins. but she built this incredible business. Made a lot of mistakes. Biggest mistake, well, not the biggest, necessarily the biggest, but buying Berkshire Hathaway itself was a mistake because Berkshire was a lousy textile business. And I bought it very cheap. I've been taught by Ben Graham to buy things on a quantitative basis. Look around for things that are cheap. And that I was taught that, say, in 1949 or 50. It made a big impression on me. So I went around looking for what I call used cigar butts of stocks. And the cigar butt approach to buying stocks is that you walk down the street and you're looking around for cigar butts and you find this, on the street, this terrible looking, soggy, ugly looking cigar, one puff left in it. But you pick it up and you get your one puff. It's disgusting, you throw it away, but it's free. I mean, it's cheap. And then you look around for another soggy, one puff cigarette. Well, that's what I did for years. It's a mistake. Although you can make money doing it, but you can't make it with big money. It's so much easier just to buy wonderful businesses. So now I would rather buy a wonderful business at a fair price than a fair business at a wonderful price. But in those days, I was buying cheap stocks. And Berkshire was selling below its working capital per share. You got the plants for nothing. You got the machinery for nothing. You got the inventory and receivables at a discount. It was cheap. So I bought it. And 20 years later, I was still running a lousy business. And that money did not compound. You really want to be in a wonderful business because the time is the friend of the wonderful business. You keep compounding, it keeps doing more business, and you keep making more money. Time is the enemy of the lousy business. I could have sold Berkshire, perhaps liquidated it, and made a quick little profit, one puff. But staying with those kind of businesses is a big mistake. So you might say I learned something out of that mistake, and I would have been way better off taking what I did with Berkshire is I kept buying better businesses. I started the insurance business, See's Candy, the Buffalo, all kinds of things. I would have been way better doing that with a brand new little entity that I'd set up rather than using Berkshire as a platform. Now I've had a lot of fun out of it. I mean, everything in life seems to turn out for the better, so I don't have any complaints about that, but it was a dumb thing to do. I went into U.S. Air. I bought a preferred stock in 1989. As soon as my check cleared, the company went into the red and never got out. I mean, it was really dumb. I mean, I've got an 800 number I call now whenever I think about buying an airline stock. I call them up any hour that, fortunately, I can call them at 3 in the morning, and I just dial and I say, my name's Warren, I'm an aeroholic, and I'm thinking about buying this thing, and then they talk me down. I mean, it takes hours sometimes, but it's worth it, believe me. If you ever think about that buying an airline stock, call me and I'll give you the 800 number, because you don't want to do it. But we got lucky in terms of how we eventually came out on it, but it was a dumb decision, all mine.
You will move in the direction of the people that you associate with. So it's important to associate with people that are better than yourself, and actually the most important decision many of you make, not all of you, will be the spouse you choose. And you want to associate with people who are the kind of person you'd like to be. You'll move in that direction, and the most important person by far in that respect is your spouse. I can't overemphasize how important that is. You're right. The friends you have, they will form you as you go through life, and make some good friends, keep them for the rest of your life, but have them be people that you admire as well as like. But you buy a business, if you buy a farm, do you go up and look, every couple of weeks to see how far the corn is up, and do you worry too much about whether somebody says this is going to be a year of low prices because exports are being affected or anything like that? You buy a farm and you hold it for, I've got one farm that I bought in the 1980s, and my son runs it, but I've been there once, I mean, it doesn't grow faster if I go and stare at it, I can't cheer for it, more effort or something like that. And I know there's going to be some years when prices are going to be good and some when prices aren't going to be good. I know there's years when yields will be better than others. What about the farm? And it just doesn't, I don't care about economic predictions on it or anything of the sort. I do care that over the years it's well tended to, and in terms of rotating crops, and I hope yields get better, which they generally have. In fact, that farm 100 years ago would have probably produced 30 bushels, maybe 35 bushels of corn per acre, Now in a good year, it'd be 200. I mean, we've really made progress in this country. That's one reason commodity prices, if you go back a couple hundred years, they've moved so little, is because we've just gotten better and better at whether it's cotton or whether it's corn or soybeans or all kinds of things. And you and I have benefited from that.
And so Apple's kind of like a farm.
Well, it's a long-term investment, and if you owned the best auto dealership in town, the best brand, and had somebody good running it, you wouldn't drop by every day and say, how many people have come in today, or I think interest rates are going up a little, maybe it'll slow down our sales or anything. No, you buy it knowing there's 365 days a year, and you're going to own it for 20 years, so that's 7,300 days, and things are going to be different from day to day and year to year. You shouldn't buy it if the day-to-day stuff is important.
If you think you're going to be a lot happier if you've got 2X instead of X, you're probably making a mistake. I mean, you ought to find something you like that works with that, and you'll get in trouble if you think that making 10X or 20X is the answer to everything in life, because then you will do things like borrow money when you shouldn't, or maybe cut corners on things that your employer wants you to cut corners on. Or it just doesn't make any sense. You won't like it when you look back on it.
Rule number 2, hire well.
3 things in hiring people: look for integrity, intelligence, and energy. And he said if the person didn't have the first 2, that the latter 2 would kill them. Because if they don't have integrity, you want them dumb and lazy. You don't want them smart and energetic. People ask me what they should take in business school, or even if they don't go to business school, what they need to know before getting in business. And I tell them, you have to understand accounting. It's the language. I mean, it's like being in a foreign country without knowing the language if you're in business and you don't understand accounting. So you want to get as comfortable with that as you are with the English language. It's made me a lot of money because I listened to what Ray Dean had to say 53 or 4 years ago, and have been able to understand what I was seeing on pieces of paper, what that told me about businesses, and the limitations of what it told me about businesses.
Look around you at the people you admire. They have certain qualities. I mean, you've got friends. Why do you like them? Generally, generally they have an upbeat attitude on life. Generally, they are generous people. They're humorous people. They're people that do more than their share. They're people that are thinking about something nice they can do for you. And all of those qualities attract you. And none of those are innate at birth. I mean, you can acquire those. And then there's other people that turn you off, and they have habits. They take credit for things they didn't do. They don't show up on time, whatever it may be. They're a little dishonest about things. And if you're looking at your life at a young age like you are, and you can choose what kind of a person you can be, why not be the person you admire rather than the person you can't stand? It's so simple. So just write down the qualities you like. Take your 5 best friends. Why do you like them? And just write down those qualities. And you will find there's no quality there that you can't have yourself. And similarly with the 5 people you can't stand to be, turn you off about those people. And if they turn you off about them, why should you possess them? It's so simple. It's not like something complicated that you think you should be learning with an advanced degree in school.
It's not as complicated as investing in the stock market.
No, but it's enormously important to have people work with you in life. Right. They're going to work with you in life if they like you. And they may occasionally, if you're in the Army or something, you may work for somebody that you don't like. But by and large, you're going to get the best out of people if they feel good about you. And it's just so easy, but you've got to develop the habits early, because you can't say I'm going to suddenly become a terribly attractive person when I'm 60. It just doesn't work that way. So pick up the right habits now. And I will guarantee you, if you actually just write down those qualities and think about it, you will find you can have every one of the attractive qualities, get rid of the ones that are negative, and your life will be different.
Rule number 14, think independently.
I'd like to know, we all consider you to be the financial business experts, and we look to you and follow your lead. But when you need advice and feedback about an idea or decision, I'd like to know, who do you go to?
Well, usually I look in the mirror. To be perfectly honest. the nature of what I do means I have to think pretty much independently. Because if I take a poll, in effect, I'm going to do what everybody else is doing, and I don't think much of that usually in investments. And so I have to have an environment, I have to have a temperament personally that lets me think for myself. And I've got a terrific partner, a fellow named Charlie Munger, and you can't find anybody any smarter, any better quality of anything. But we think a lot alike, and we do talk things over occasionally, but we don't talk them over very often because I know how he thinks, he knows how I think. He's taught me a lot, and why should I pay for a phone call if I know what he's going to say? So if I need to get a cabinet around to make decisions or anything like that, I probably shouldn't be running the place. That doesn't bother me to have the responsibility for it, but I just don't want to put it up to a vote because I've seen too many, particularly in the investment world, as you get larger and larger groups making the decisions, they get more and more homogenized. And I don't think you will ever get brilliant investment decisions out of a large committee.
The question is about the personal qualities we look for in the executives we place at our various companies. The first thing is we don't usually place them. They come with them. We don't have anybody to place. So I have the problem occasionally, if somebody dies or to replace a CEO. But most of our CEOs came with the deal. Clayton Homes, which we're buying, comes with Kevin Clayton running it. We will put no one in there. He will run the place just as before. But in terms of the personal quality, when a seller comes to me with a business, whether it's Clayton or any of the others, Ike Friedman at Borsheim's, Mrs. B at Nebraska Furniture Mart, when they come to me, the first question I have to ask myself, because I'm counting on them to run the place, I have to decide, do they love the money or do they love the business? Now, there's nothing wrong with liking the money. They all like money, but they've got to love the business. They got to have a passion for it. Because if I give them a whole bunch of money and they love the money and they don't love the business, no matter what they tell me, 6 months from now they'll be gone. They'll just all of a sudden say, why am I getting up at 7 in the morning just so I can send a lot of money to Omaha? It won't work. So they have to love the business. I want people with a passion for the business. I used to say that I had a one-line employment form, one-question employment form. The question was, are you a fanatic? If you answered yes, you got the job. Because I want somebody who's a fanatic about their business.
I was wondering how you define success personally.
Well, I can certainly define happiness because that's what I am. I get to do what I like to do every single day of the year, and I get to do it with people I like. I don't have to associate with anybody causes my stomach to churn. The only thing in my job I don't like, and this only happens about every 3 or 4 years, occasionally I have to fire somebody, and I don't like. That's the only thing. Other than I tap dance to work, and I get down there, and I think I'm supposed to lie on my back and paint the ceiling, or something like my. That's the way I feel, and it doesn't diminish. It's tremendous fun. So, if they say that success is getting what you want and happiness is wanting what you get. Well, I don't know which one applies in this case, but I do know that I wouldn't be doing anything else. I do advise you, when you go out to work, go to work for an organization that you admire, people you admire, because it'll turn you on, and you ought to be happy where you are working. And I always worry about people who say, I'm going to do this for 10 years. I really don't like it very well. I'll do 10 more years of this. That's a little like saving up sex for your old age. Not a very good idea. So get right in.
You would recommend that.
Get right into what you enjoy, and you'll be successful at it. You really will. You won't be able to miss. And that's. I don't regard what I do as the most important thing in the world at all, but it's right for me. I happen to be wired in a certain way that what I do works in this. If I had to do what Bill does, it lasts about 10 minutes, and that's true of a lot of things. But luckily, I kind of stumbled into the thing that I do best, and that it's worked out well. Having the right heroes, is terribly important. You tell me who a 10-year-old's heroes are. and I can give you a pretty good prediction about how they're going to turn out. You want to choose your heroes very carefully, because you're going to look like them at some point, and you're lucky if you've got the right ones.
I have an old-fashioned belief that I only should expect to make money in things that I understand. And when I say understand, I don't mean understand, what the product does or anything like that. I mean understand what the economics of the business are likely to look like 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I know, in general, what the economics of, say, Wrigley chewing gum will look like 10 years from now. The internet isn't going to change the way people chew gum. It isn't going to change which gum they chew. If you own the chewing gum market in a big way, and you've got Double Mint and Spearmint and Juicy Fruit, those brands will be there 10 years from now. So I can't pinpoint exactly what the numbers are going to look like on Wrigley, but I'm not going to be way off if I try to look forward on something like that. Evaluating that company is within what I call my circle of competence. I understand what they do, I understand the economics of it, I understand the competitive aspects of the business. So figuring out the economic consequences. TV, I think there's, 20, 25 million sets a year sold in the United States. I don't think there's one of them made in the United States anymore. You'd say TV set manufacturer, what a wonderful business. Everybody, nobody had a TV in 1950, or thereabouts, 45 to 50. Everybody has multiple sets now. Nobody in the United States has made any real money making the sets. They're all out of business. The Magna boxes, the RCAs, all of those companies. Radio was the equivalent in the 20s. Over 500 companies making radios in the 1920s. Again, I don't think there's a U.S. radio manufacturer at the present time. But Coca-Cola, what was it, 1884 at Jacobs Pharmacy or whatever, the fellow comes up with something. A lot of copiers over the years. But now you've got a company that is selling roughly 1.1 billion 8-ounce servings of its product, not all Coke, Sprite, and some others, daily throughout the world 117 years later. So understanding the economic characteristics of a business is different than predicting the fact that an industry is going to do wonderfully. And so when I look at the internet businesses, or I look at tech businesses, I say this is a marvelous thing, and I love to play around on the computer, and now I order my books from Amazon and all kinds of things, but I don't know who's going to win. And unless I know who's going to win, I'm not interested in investing. I'll just play around on the computer. And defining your circle of competence is the most important aspect of investing. It's not how important, how large your circle is. You don't have to be an expert on everything. But knowing where the perimeter of that circle of what you know and what you don't know is, and staying inside of it, is all important. Tom Watson Sr., who started IBM, said in his book, he said, I'm no genius, he said, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. And that is the key. So if I understand a few things, and I stick in that arena, I'll do okay. And if I don't understand something, but I get all excited about it because my neighbors are talking about it, the stocks are going up and everything, I start fooling around someplace else, eventually I'll get creamed, and I should.
This lesson about a margin of safety, that you don't drive a truck that weighs 9,900 pounds across a bridge that says limit 10,000 pounds, because you can't be that sure about it. If you see something like that, you go down a little further down the road and you find one that says limit 20,000 pounds, and that's the one you drive across. I advise students, as much as possible, look for the job that you would take if you didn't need a job. Don't sleepwalk with life, and don't say it's all going to be great. I'll do this and I'll do that. And, I'm just marking time to be older. I've told people that's like saving up sex for your old age. It just is not. It is not a good idea. Yeah.
What are you urging them to do?
I'll explain it. Just what I'm talking about. Now, you really want to be doing what you love doing, and you can't necessarily find it on your first job, right? But don't give up before you find it.
The allowance when I was a little boy was a nickel a week, but I liked the idea of having a little more than a nickel a week to work with, and I went into business very early. I started selling Coca-Cola door to door. I sold gum door to door, or sold Saturday Evening Post, Liberty Magazine, Ladies Home Journal, you name it. I think I enjoyed the game almost right from the start. But I like being my own boss. That's one thing I like about delivering papers. I could arrange the route I wanted. Nobody was bothering me at 5 or 6 in the morning. I was delivering 500 papers a day, and I made a penny a paper, but in terms of compounding, that penny turned into something else.
In business, I swing at easy pitches. I stand there at the plate, and if I like pitches 1 inch above my navel, right in the center of the plate, I can wait and wait and wait because there's no called strikes. As long as that bat's on my shoulder, nobody's calling a strike. If the pitcher throws me General Motors at 36, IBM at 82, Microsoft at 25, and I don't swing, it's not a strike. It's not a hit either, but it's not a strike. Only when I swing is it a strike. So I wait for easy pitches. I wait for things I understand are exactly in my sweet spot. They turn failure into a plus. And it's true, when I was at the University of Nebraska, one day I was reading the Daily Nebraskan, and it said in room 300 or something, at 3 o'clock there will be this panel of 3 professors here at the university, and they're going to award the Nathan Gold Scholarship. I don't know whether you still have that around. And at the time, it said it would give you $500 to go to the graduate school of your choice. I don't know whether it's changed in amount, but that was it. So I read this, and I went there to this room at 3 o'clock that day, or whatever it was, and I walked in the room, and there were the professors, and I was the only student that showed up. I mean, it really got to them. I mean, they were stuck. They kept waiting and looking at their watch and hoping there'd be more candidates, but no one came in. So I won $500 by default. And those are usually my biggest triumphs when nobody else shows up. And so here I was. I had $500 to go toward it wasn't limited, any graduate school for a master's degree. So I applied to Harvard. My dad wanted me to. And I shortly heard from Harvard, and they said, go to Chicago and meet this fellow who interviews applicants from the Midwest. So I got on the train, and that's what you did in those days, and I spent 10 hours on the Burlington going to Chicago. Then I transferred to another little interurban train to go up to this country day school where this fellow was the headmaster, and he was the big interviewer for Harvard. And I got there, and after about 10 minutes, he said, better think about something else. He come back later on. I was 19 at the time, and I looked about 12, and I acted about 8. So it was not a great combination. So he said, forget it. So I took the little interurban train back to Chicago, and I took the 10-hour train back to Omaha, and all the time I'm thinking, what do I tell my parents? It's kind of embarrassing. But it was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. Because if I'd gone to Harvard, I would have gone to a 2-year business school. I instead applied to Columbia, where I could graduate in 1 year and get a master's degree. Luckily, that by the accident of it and being in the Nebraska National Guard, which did not get called up for the Korean War, I missed going in the Korean War. I got to meet Ben Graham, which had an enormous effect on me subsequently. And I probably got my wife that way because she was going to Northwestern. And I was able to put on sort of a full court press because I got out in 1 year. And otherwise, she'd have met some other guy. I mean, I got her before the competition showed up. And so it worked out wonderfully. It couldn't have worked out better. And that's been my life, basically. I mean, things... you will get some disappointments. But the future is what counts. If I knew every decision I was going to make was going to be perfect, it would not be as much fun. It'd be like playing golf and knowing you're going to hit a hole-in-one on every hole. You wouldn't play golf if every time you got on a tee, you just took a swing and the ball ended up in the hole. It'd be fun for a few days. You get on TV. But the game would not be any fun. So it's failure, and I wouldn't even consider them failures, but they're mistakes or whatever you want to call it. They're part of the game, And in the end, you go on and we've made plenty of mistakes in business. We'll make plenty more. And the Babe Ruth and, for a long time, it subsequently got eclipsed by a few fellas, but he held the record for strikeouts. So that held the record for home runs and was the highest paid baseball player until the modern era came along. So it's part of the game. If you take big swings, you're going to miss sometimes.
Somebody once said that the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. I had been terrified of public speaking. I couldn't do it. I'd throw up. And I knew if I didn't cure it then, I'd never cure it. And so I saw an ad in the paper for the Dale Carnegie course, which worked on developing your ability to speak in public. And I went down there.
Be sincere. A good smile has the same effect as a puppy's tail. When a puppy wags.
They made us do all these crazy things to get out of ourselves, and so we stood on tables and did all kinds of things. If I hadn't have done that, my whole life would have been different. So in my office, you will not see the degree I got from the University of Nebraska. You'll not see the master's degree I got from Columbia University, but you'll see the little award certificate I got from the Dale Carnegie course.
The nature of capitalism is that people want to come in and take your castle. Perfectly understandable. I mean, if I'm selling television sets or something, there's going to be 10 other people that are going to try and sell a better television set. If I have a restaurant here in Omaha, people are going to try and copy my menu and give more parking and take my chef and so on. So capitalism's all about somebody coming and trying to take the castle. Now, what you need is a castle that has some durable competitive advantage, some castle that has a moat around it. And that moat, one of the best moats in many respects, is to be a low-cost producer. But sometimes the moat is just having more talent. I mean, if you're the heavyweight champion of the world and you keep knocking out people, you've got a competitive advantage as long as you can keep doing it. And it's very profitable if you're the one that happens to be able to do it. If you can turn out great motion pictures, I mean, Steven Spielberg, I mean, he's a fellow to bet on, and it has enormous economic value.
Warren, what do you consider the most important quality for an investment manager?
It's a temperamental quality, not an intellectual quality. You don't need tons of IQ in this business. I mean, you have to have enough IQ to get from here to downtown Omaha, but you do not have to be able to play three-dimensional chess or be in the top leagues in terms of bridge playing or something of the sort. You need a stable personality. You need a temperament that neither derives great pleasure from being with the crowd or against the crowd, because this is not a business where you take polls. It's a business where you think. And Ben Graham would say that you're not right or wrong because 1,000 people agree with you. And you're not right or wrong because 1,000 people disagree with you. You're right because your facts and your reasoning are right.
Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting, and in it he had a picture of himself at bat and the strike zone broken into, I think, 77 squares. And he said if he waited for the pitch that was really in his sweet spot, he would bat 400, and if he had to swing at something on the lower corner, he would probably bat 235. And in investing, I'm in a no-called strike business, which is the best business you can be in. I can look at 1,000 different companies, and I don't have to be right on every one of them or even 50 of them. So I can pick the ball I want to hit. And the trick in investing is just to sit there and watch pitch after pitch go by and wait for the one right in your sweet spot. And if people are yelling, "Swing, you bum," ignore them. There's a temptation for people to act far too frequently in stocks simply because they're so liquid. Over the years, you develop a lot of filters. And I do know what I call my circle of competence. So I stay within that circle, and I don't worry about things that are outside that circle. Defining what your game is, where you're going to have an edge, is enormously important.
Both of us know that we've done better by having ethics. Warren's not interested in making money by cheating people.
Warren's opinions of Wall Street investment bankers would not endear him to their mothers. He feels that they're, for the most part, not out for their clients. They're out for their own business interests.
In the late 1960s, there were just a flood of accounting shenanigans and mergers built upon false accounting and misleading people. it was a time when a lot of charlatans were prevailing in Wall Street and were being applauded by Wall Street. And I understood what the game was about, but I didn't want to play in it. So I closed down the partnership at the end of 1969, and I took on the title of chairman for Berkshire Hathaway. Henry Ford, as you may know, failed twice before he started the Ford Motor Company in 1903. I mean, the test isn't whether you get the greatest business idea in the world the first time out. The test is whether you keep learning as you go along what your strengths are and what you can do for your customers, what you can bring especially to the party. And to do that, you need a genuine desire day in, day out to delight the customer. I've never seen a business, and I've seen a lot of businesses, but I've never seen one that delights the customer that doesn't succeed. I mean, what you want is that customer the next day when they think, do I want to rent a car or do I want to buy some furniture? What goes through their mind? You know, it's the place where they've had a great experience. I don't know what I paid for this time. Actually, probably if somebody gave it to me for the purposes of the speech, I will say I have no idea, but or the shirt I'm wearing, or this, but I do know, I will remember how I was treated when I bought it. I mean, you long forget about the price, but you never forget whether you had a good experience or a poor experience with the purchase experience.
I'm just wondering, what would you consider to be the worst investment you've ever made?
The worst investment I ever made? How long do you have? I've made some very bad ones, but that doesn't really bother me. It may bother the shareholders, but that's another question. You're going to make mistakes in life. I mean, there's no question about it. You don't want to make them on the big decisions, who you marry and some things like that. So there's no way I'm going to make a lot of business and investment decisions without making some mistakes. I may try to minimize them. I don't dwell on them at all. I don't look back. The biggest mistakes are the ones that actually don't show up. They're the mistakes of omission rather than commission. We've never lost that much money on any one investment. But it's the things that I knew enough to do that I didn't do. We have missed profits of as much as maybe $10 billion in things that I knew enough to do and I didn't do. Now, the fact I didn't buy Microsoft way back is not a foregone opportunity because I didn't know enough to make that decision. But there have been other investments where I did know enough to make the decision, and for one reason or another, I either didn't do it at all or I did it on a small scale. I was sucking my thumb when I should have been writing checks, basically. And those don't show up. There's no place where it shows missed opportunities, but I've missed some big ones. The triumphs in life are partly triumphs because you know that everything isn't going to be a triumph. I would never get too hung up on mistakes. I know a lot of people that really agonize over them, and it just isn't worth it. I mean, tomorrow's another day, and you live it forward and just go on to the next thing.
How can other people tap dance to work? What's the secret of that?
You find your passion. You find your passion. I was very, very lucky to find it, when I was 7 or 8 years old, and fortunately, my children have found their passion. One son loves farming like nothing else. One son loves music like everything else, and all three of them love philanthropy and what they get to do. You're lucky in life when you find it, and you can't guarantee you're going to find it in your first job out. But I always tell college students that come out, I say, take the job that you would take if you were independently wealthy. You're going to do well at it. Students last week, 160 of them from Harvard and South Dakota State. I just tell them, try to find your passion. And may not find it the first time, but don't sleepwalk through life. Find something that you really enjoy doing if you can do it, and not everybody's lucky enough to be able to find that, but it ought to be your goal. To make $10 a week more doing something that you don't feel good about compared to something you'd feel good about, make the change.
Bill said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, the thing you do obsessively between age 13 and 18, that's the thing you have the most chance of being world class at. Yeah. Bill said his one thing was coding. What was your one obsessive thing?
I was pretty interested in investments. Bill and I, his father, many years ago, right after we met, had us a group of about 20 write down on a sheet of paper one word that they thought accounted for their success. And Bill and I, who may only met twice, didn't know what the other one was writing down. We both wrote down the same word, which was focus. And he was focused on software, I was focused on investments. And it gave me a big advantage to start very young. There's no question about it.
How do I value the business that Berkshire acquires? Well, the first thing I have to decide when somebody calls me is valuing this business within my circle of competence. I don't know how to value Microsoft. I don't know how to value Oracle. I mean, if Larry Ellison calls me or Bill Gates calls me, and they don't. But if any of those, I don't know, or biotech or anything, I wouldn't know how to value it. I just, I'd wish them well and tell them, I think it's worth twice as much as they think it is, but I'm just not in the mood to buy today. I don't know. So it has to be within my circle of competence. My circle of competence, businesses I can understand. And when I say understand, I don't mean understand how to use a computer or not use a computer in terms of a computer company. I mean understand what the economic characteristics of the business are and what the company's really going to look like in 5 or 10 or 20 years. Bill Gates will tell you that he, if he were investing, he would buy Berkshire rather than Microsoft because it's so much easier to understand what our businesses are going to look like, whereas he's in a business where you're going to really have to be doing things differently over time. So I know that Wrigley's is going to be the #1 chewing gum in the country. I know Snickers is going to be the #1 candy bar in the country 10 years from now. It's been the #1 candy bar for 40 years. You don't have to be very bright to understand that when people lay out 50 cents for something that they stick in their mouth, that they're not about to experiment. I mean, we try to look at businesses we can understand.
I don't need to be in Washington to figure out what the Washington Post newspaper is worth, and I don't need to be in New York to figure out what some other company is worth. It's an intellectual process, and the less static there is in that intellectual process, really the better off you are.
What is the intellectual process?
The intellectual process is defining your level, defining your area of competence in valuing businesses, and then within that area of competence, finding whatever sells at the cheapest price in relation to value. And there are all kinds of things I'm not competent to value, but there are a few that I am competent to value.
Have you ever bought a technology company?
No, I really haven't.
In 30 years of investing, not one?
I haven't understood any of them.
So you haven't ever owned, for example, IBM?
Never owned IBM. Marvelous company. I mean, a sensational company, but I haven't owned IBM.
And so here is this technological revolution going on, and you're not going to be a participant.
Gone right past me.
Is that all right with you?
It's okay with me. I don't have to make money in every game. I mean, I don't know what cocoa beans are going to do. There are all kinds of things I don't know about, and that may be too bad. But why should I know all about them? I haven't worked that hard on them. In the securities business, you literally every day have thousands of the major American corporations offered to you at a price that changes daily. And you don't have to make any decisions. You have to make, nothing is forced upon you. So there are no called strikes in the business. The pitcher just stands there and throws balls at you. And if you're playing real baseball and it's between the knees and the shoulders, you either swing or you got a strike called on you. If you get too many called on you, you're out. In the securities business, you sit there and they throw U.S. Steel at 25 and they throw General Motors at 68, and you don't have to swing at any of them. They may be wonderful pitches to swing at, but if you don't know enough, you don't have to swing. And you can sit there and watch thousands of pitches, and finally you get one right there where you want it, something that you understand, and then you swing. And
so you might not swing for 6 months.
You might not swing for 2 years.
I always look at IQ and talent as sort of representing the horsepower of the motor, but then in terms of the output, the efficiency with which the motor works, that depends on rationality, because a lot of people start out with 400 horsepower motors and get 100 horsepower of output, and it's way better to have a 200 horsepower motor and get it all into output. So why do smart people do things that interfere with really getting the output they're entitled to? And it gets into habits, into character, into temperament, and it really gets into behaving in a rational manner. It's not getting in your own way. As I say, everybody here has the ability absolutely to do anything I do and much beyond. And some of you will, and some of you won't. But it will. The ones that won't, it will be because you get in your own way. It won't because the world doesn't allow you to. It will be because you don't allow yourself to.
What are the key indicators you look for within companies before making an investment?
Well, I look for something that does give them a moat around it. We have a company called See's Candy out on the West Coast. See's Candy is boxed chocolates. If you give a box of See's chocolates to your girlfriend on the first date and she kisses you, we own you. You know, I mean, we can raise the price tomorrow and you'll buy the same box. You're not going to fool around with success. So the key there is the response. You do not want to go home on Valentine's Day and say to your wife or your sweetheart, preferably they're the same person, you don't say, here, honey, I took the low bid. It doesn't work. Price is, to a degree, is immaterial. If you've got an economic castle, people are going to come and want to take that castle away from you. And you better have a strong moat. You better have a knight in the castle that knows what he's doing.
You have given a lot of fabulous advice, but what's the best advice that you've ever received?
Well, I received it in a variety of forms, particularly from my father when I was very young. But I mean, he basically, I think, taught me how to live. Not that I did it perfectly or anything like that, but I mean, he was giving me lessons, but he wasn't doing it by preaching to me. He was doing it by example. But basically, well, the biggest lesson, in a sense, I got is the power of unconditional love. I mean, I think there is no power on earth like unconditional love. And I think that if you offer that to your child, I mean, you're 90% of the way home. And maybe days when you don't feel like it. It's not uncritical love. That's a different animal. But to know you always can come back. I mean, that is huge in life. That takes you a long, long way. And I would say that every parent out there that can extend that to their child at a very young age, it's going to make for a better human being.
And you felt like you got that kind of unconditional love from your dad?
I absolutely did, yeah.
That is a powerful thing.
It is a powerful thing.
I'm 72. I'm getting Social Security now, so I should be in Florida, pushing shuffleboard around or something of the sort. But I do what I can do. Anything in the world I want to do. But what I want to do is run Berkshire Hathaway. Now, why do I want to run it that way? I get to paint my own painting. I go down there every day, and I feel like Michelangelo. They're working on the Sistine Chapel or something. Nobody else may think it's a great painting, but I get to paint my own painting. I do not have people second guessing me. I do not have people saying, why don't you use a little more red paint than blue paint? Why don't you paint a seascape instead of a landscape? I get to do my own thing. It's a form of creativity. It's exactly like somebody feels it's a professional golfer or somebody feels it's a painter. They're not doing it for the money, primarily. They're doing it because they like doing something well. We've got a company, Flight Safety, that trains more pilots than anybody in the world. Flight Safety is run by an 85-year-old man, Al Yulshi. Al started the company with $10,000 in 1951. It now trains 4 or 5 times as many pilots as non-military pilots as anybody in the world. And he is there at 85, and it's a matter of public record. He's got $1 billion worth of Berkshire shares. He works 7 days a week. He loves it. And he loves it for the same reason that I love what I do. He gets to do it his way. He buys these big simulators that you train pilots in. He doesn't have to check with me as to whether to spend $15 million for a simulator. He doesn't ask me. He knows so much more about it than I do. Why in the world would he ask me? Well, I can't tell what kind of a plane I'm in, when I'm flying around. And Al is spending a couple $100 million a year on simulators, spending Berkshire Hathaway money, and he never checks with Omaha. He's never had to come to Omaha for any kind of meetings. He runs his own business, and that's what he loves in life. And I let him do it. I mean, that's my contribution to it, is really turning loose his energies. And they were properly directed before we bought the company 7 or 8 years ago. Why should I think that he couldn't keep running it after that? And like I say, at 85, he's still running it. And that feeling of ownership is really extraordinary, and it's so much better. I mean, it's the way I like to work, and it's the way Susan Jock likes to work. It's the way Al Yulshi likes to work. It takes 3 qualities, essentially, to do well, and extremely well, actually, in this country. It takes intelligence, it takes energy, and it takes integrity. And I say, if you don't have integrity, we don't want to hire somebody that's got intelligence and energy if they don't have integrity. We'd rather hire somebody that's dumb and lazy if they don't have integrity, because they probably will never get around to cheating us or doing something of the sort. And integrity is absolutely an option. You may not be able to throw a football 60 yards, and you may not be able to run the 100 in 9.8. You may not be able to sink 3-pointers but you can choose where you stand on the integrity scale. You
You weren't born wired one way or the other. That is an absolute choice you make.
Warren is probably the most rational person I've ever met. Charlie Munger would be a close rival. And Charlie became a man that Warren depended on heavily. And I think his first experiences in the discarded cigar butt era convinced him that it was not exactly where he wanted to be.
He'd made so much money for so long doing what he'd been taught by Ben Graham, which is to buy these very cheap stocks. And if they were cheap enough, he didn't care if it was a lousy company and a lousy management. He knew he was going to make money anyway just because of the cheapness.
Charlie Munger has had a big impact on me in moving me toward looking for wonderful companies at fair prices rather than fair companies at wonderful prices. And that was enormously important because it enabled Berkshire to scale up in a way that would have been impossible to do otherwise.
We were mental partners right from the moment we met.
I want to know, going back 50 years, what it was like when you first met Warren.
Well, I thought he was a prodigy. And I got a lot of criticism. My wife said, "Why are you paying such enormous respect to that young man with a crew cut who won't eat vegetables?"
He's ungodly smart. He's got a much broader intellect than I do. And he's magnificent at being able to condense important ideas into just a very few words.
If you're not interested in the economic scene right now, you're mentally dead.
Charlie has no tact.
All right, let's talk a little bit about bankers. Charlie on Friday compared them to heroin addicts.
Yeah, well, that's colorful, Charlie, but I would not have chosen that.
I once wrote of him that when they handed out humility, he didn't get his fair share.
The ideal way to run a headquarters is to have one man, preferably over 80, sitting in an office by himself. Anything else is pure frippery.
He's always honest in what he tells me, so I listen to him.
We never had an argument. We just kind of roll with it easily. Suppose Warren doesn't want to do something that I would have done. And suppose that happens 4 times over 4 years or something. What the hell difference does it make to me? Net, the record is working out fine.
Leadership at Berkshire really consists of taking a bunch of people who, in a baseball analogy, would be 400 hitters and just handing them the bat and just telling them to get up the plate and take a big swing. There's very little to it beyond that. One thing I do is I send them a letter. The only thing I tell them, and this letter, which went out January 20th, 2003, it says it's been 2.5 years since my last memo. Now, how many big companies do you have the managers out there been 2.5 years since they've heard from the home office? It's been 2.5 years since my last memo. Here are a couple things to keep in mind. And number one, and this is number one every time, this doesn't change. It won't change 2 years from now or 4 years from now or 6 years from now. Number one, we can afford to lose money, even a lot of money. We cannot afford to lose reputation, even a shred of reputation. Let's be sure that everything we do in business can be reported on the front page of a national newspaper in an article written by an unfriendly but intelligent reporter. In many areas, including acquisitions, Berkshire's results have benefited from its reputation, and we don't want to do anything that in any way can tarnish it. Last year, Berkshire was ranked by Fortune as the 4th most admired company in the world. This year, we were 3rd in the United States. They just published it. It took us 37 years to get there, but we could lose it in 37 minutes. And that's the message. I mean, we can lose money. It does, it's nicer to make money, but we'll figure out ways to make money. But we can't lose a shred of reputation because you don't get it back. And you can, I said 37 minutes, but you can lose it a lot faster than that. You can lose it in 5 minutes.
It never bothered me if people disagreed with what I thought, as long as I felt I knew the facts. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things I don't know a thing about. I just stay away from those. So I stay within what I call my circle of competence. And Tom Watson said it best. He said, I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. Well, I try and stay around those spots, and I just don't have a problem if somebody says, you're wrong on something. I go back and look at the facts, and I think that really is much more important, frankly, than having a few points of IQ or having an extra course or two in school or anything of the sort. You need emotional stability.
70 years ago, I was in high school, almost a third as long as the country has been around. And when I was in high school, I really only had two things on my mind: girls and cars. and I wasn't doing very well with girls, so we'll talk about cars. But let's just imagine that when we finish, I'm going to let each one of you pick out the car of your choice. Sounds good, doesn't it? Pick it out, any color, you name it. It'll be tied up with a bow, and it'll be at your house tomorrow. And you say, well, what's the catch? And the catch is that it's the only car you're going to get in your lifetime. Now, what are you going to do knowing that that's the only car you're ever going to have and you love that car? You're going to take care of it like you cannot believe. Now, what I'd like to suggest, you're not going to get only one car in your lifetime, but you're going to get one body and one mind, and that's all you're going to get. And that body and mind feels terrific now, but it has to last you a lifetime.
Well, in 1973, the Washington Post company had gone public in 1971, right about the Pentagon Papers type time. But in 73, the Nixon administration was, through B.B. Rebozo, who was a pal of Nixon's, they were challenging the licenses of two of the Florida television stations the Post owned. So the stock went from 37 down to 16. Now, at 16, there were about 5 million shares outstanding. So the whole Washington Post company was selling for $80 million. And that included the newspaper, 4 big TV stations, Newsweek, and some other assets, and no debt to speak of. So the Washington Post company, which was intrinsically worth $400 or $500 million, was selling for about 80 million in the market. We bought most of our stock at about the equivalent of 100 million in the market. And it was ridiculous. I mean, you had a business that unquestionably was worth 4 or 5 times what it was selling for. And Nixon wasn't going to put them out of business.
When you're doing these analyses then and now, do you have computers that help you, or how did you actually read get the materials to read about the Washington Post? How do you do it today?
Well, pretty much the same way, except there's fewer opportunities now. But I met Bob Woodward back, and he'd just come out with all the president's men, and all of a sudden, as below 30 years of age, he was getting quite wealthy. And we had breakfast or lunch over at the Madison Hotel. And he said, "What do I do with this money?" And I said, investing is just about assigning yourself the right story. I said, imagine Ben Bradley this morning said to you, what is the Washington Post company worth? What would you do if you have to write the story in a month? You'd go out and interview TV brokers and newspaper brokers and the owners, and you'd try and value each asset. I said, that's what I do. I assign myself the right story. And it's nothing more than that. Now, there's some stories I can't write. If you ask me to write a story on, what is some glamorous but non-profit making business worth, I don't know how to write that story. But if you ask me to write a story on what is Potomac Electric Power worth or something like that, I can write the story. And that's what I'm doing every day. I'm assigning myself a story, and then I go out and...
Rule number 37, read.
I should mention one thing about reading. It was at the library here at Columbia that I wish I spent probably more time than any other student. I lived there practically. But I pulled the book out there, happened to be Who's Who in America, and it told me something about my professor, Benjamin Graham, and then I looked up and I went to the library and I said, I want to learn more about this because I learned this over here. That changed my whole life. We own Geico now because of that librarian directing me to some other book and then following through on that. It's the chance. I read about 1/5 the pace that Bill does, but I still spend 5 or 6 hours a day reading. I mean, you can learn so much. I particularly love biography. Just, to be able to live the lives of these people that have been so extraordinary, the lessons and the discouragements they face, just everything about it. So you can't get enough of reading.
You'd be surprised at my days. I mean, they're very unstructured. No meetings, none. I mean, I don't like meetings, and I read a lot. I wish I were a faster reader. I'd get more done. But I do read a lot, and I'm on the phone a moderate amount. Our businesses run themselves basically out there. My job is allocating capital, and that's what I'm thinking about. But I don't like to have things all packed hour to hour to hour. And Bill and I are both extraordinarily lucky. I mean, we really get to do what we like to do, the way we want to do it, with people that we choose to be around, and they're terrific. I mean, we've really got everything our way, and we're very fortunate. And in his world, he has a different kind of pace than I have, but we both love it the way we do it. And my guess is that we're each the most productive in that particular mode too, because it fits our personalities and aptitudes.
You tell me who your heroes are, I can tell you how you're going to turn out to quite an extent by this point in life. And I have been extraordinarily lucky, and none of my heroes ever let me down. I mean, the ones I came up with throughout their lives, I've never felt that I've been let down in any way with it. Number one was my dad, and had a huge impression on me. My wife, who is here, is one of my heroes. I mean, she is, in terms of she's taught me a tremendous amount, and never seen anybody any better with human beings than she is. And you can, Yogi Berra again said you can observe a lot just by watching. And I watched my dad, and I've watched her, and I had a professor, Ben Graham, back at Columbia, and had a huge impact on me. So I have been lucky in that I've had terrific heroes, and they haven't let me down. And that takes you a long, long way. I've gone through one or two periods where we're kind of tough in life, but not. I mean, everybody's had that, but having the right heroes will take you right through it.
Who was Ben Graham? He was your primary mentor, model?
He was a wonderful man, and he was my professor at Columbia. I read his book when I was 19 at the University of Nebraska, and I'd started investing when I was 11, and I started reading about it when I was like 7. So I'd gone through I read every book in the Omaha Public Library that there was by the time I was 12 on investing and stock market. And I had a lot of fun, but I never really found out, I never got grounded in anything. And it was entertaining, but it wasn't going to be profitable. And then I read Graham's book, The Intelligent Investor, when I was at the University of Nebraska. And that just opened the whole thing up to me. Yeah, and I named my oldest son is named Howard after my dad, Graham Buffett, and he was a marvelous man. Never expected anything from me in return.
Ben Graham in his low teens looked around, and he looked at the people he admired, and he said, I want to be admired, so why don't I just behave like them? And he found there was nothing impossible about behaving like them. And similarly, he did the same thing on the reverse side in terms of getting rid of those qualities.
I went one-on-one with LeBron a few years ago, and we had a jump ball. And LeBron went up, he got the tip, went the length of the court, dunked it, and just then turned around, and just then I was jumping. So that's it. I got lucky. Bill says if I'd been born a few thousand years ago, I'd have been some animal's lunch, because I'd have gone around saying, well, I allocate capital, and the animals say they're the kind that taste the best, and I can't run fast, and I can't climb trees. You don't need a lot of brains in this business. I mean, I've always said if you got an IQ of 160, give away 30 points to somebody else, because you don't need it in investments. What you do need is emotional stability. I've got a partner, Charlie Munger, says he admires humility.